This is part 2 of Ryan's series for success. Here, we're going to talk about confidence, and we're going to dive deeper into this topic. If you haven't already, make sure you watch part 1, where we talked about the positive feedback loop that builds unshakable confidence. Today, what we're going to talk about is your inner critic, and we're going to focus on naming, reframing, and replacing. Inner critic is a really important thing to understand. What is it? It's that voice in your head that always tells you that you're not good enough, that you're going to fail, and it has all these negative thoughts about you. And the problem is, it's really hard to control because sometimes those thoughts will just intrude your mind. There's all of a sudden out of nowhere, right before you're going to give a presentation, you're like, I'm going to fail, I'm going to fail, I'm going to fail. All of these things. And so the question becomes, how can we try to control this, contain it? Now, I would be lying to you if I could say, oh, you could just snap your fingers and it can go away. That's not how it works. And even extremely successful people have said time and time again, they still have this inner critic. And from my personal experience, it's something that doesn't really go away, but we can actually learn how to minimize it and contain it. Just like how a wild animal can be tamed and contained in a cage, we can also take this inner critic and force it into a smaller part of our mind and keep it more constrained so that it doesn't just all of a sudden burst out of nowhere and cause lots and lots of issues within our daily life when we're trying to achieve success. So first, we want to give it a name. We want to identify it because this is one of the most powerful things you can do is identify these moments when this inner critic is coming out at you. You could be preparing for a presentation and you're preparing, you're spending a lot of time and you've adequately prepared. You've spent time and effort trying to make sure this is the best presentation you can make, okay? And then you go to give a speech, and then right before you have these voices in your head like, what if I fail? What if I do this? You're not good enough. You can't do this. Everybody's going to see that you're not able to do this. That is what we call the inner critic. And you really have to be clear in identifying it because a lot of times people will think, oh, that's myself. That's me, somehow hurting me. We need to separate that and realize there's two parts. There's this critic that's more negative side of you, right? And there's you. And we can talk a little bit about why, we have this. It's kind of like an evolutionary thing of trying to protect us from doing dangerous things. And that's why whenever we get stressed, we kind of have this feeling of, no, we need to run away from stress. We need to, hide. We need to do this because it's all from the days of when we used to fight tigers and run away from bears and those types of things. But in today's modern world, you have to understand that stress is the thing that will grow you the most and that there's no inherent danger with stress. Like when you get stressed, there is no inherent danger. Yes, you may fail an assignment, but you're not going to die, and it's not that serious. So labeling your inner critic is super important to start to break the power that it has, that it can control you. A lot of times, it can put you in this complete paralysis. It can just take control of whatever you're doing at that moment and derail all your plans, derail all your preparation. So that's why we got to name it and identify it. Then we need to reframe it. We need to understand, why is it like this? You shouldn't beat yourself up for having these thoughts because I guarantee you that no matter how much training and listening to me you do, you can't remove these thoughts forever. But you can really try to limit them, right? So that's why we have to focus on trying to reframe them and understand that these are just negative thoughts coming out of nowhere. There's really no basis. Now, if you didn't prepare for a presentation and you go up there and you have these negative thoughts, I really can't help you because deep down within that you didn't prepare and that you might actually fail. That's a real thing. But I'm assuming that, you're prepared, you did your best relatively, and then you're going up there and you're still having these thoughts. And that's really why we have to, focus on reframing and understanding these thoughts don't have any substantial proof or evidence. Because you've already prepared so much, you shouldn't be constantly worried about failing because the only people that should be constantly worried about failing are those who didn't prepare at all. And you have to remind yourself of all the time and preparation you've put in up to this point. And that is a great way to fight off this inner critic because you're refuting it with direct evidence. And this is why, again, with confidence, like I mentioned before, you can't just think about it. You can't just imagine, oh, I'm going to be more confident and just hope that works out. That's not how it works. You have to have action and evidence to back it up, to directly refute your inner critic and banish it for good. So if we're doing a public speech and we've prepared, we can address the inner critic and say, yeah, I'm not going to fail because I know I've put in a lot of this effort or I've already tried my best. So that's a great way to kind of subdue it. Because I think, you may think, well, Ryan, I'm having an argument in my head. This is not really the best way to go. That's true. But for most of you and most of the time, the inner critic is just sporadically all over the place and doesn't have anybody to check it. Imagine if you had a tiger and you had someone with a gun, right? the tiger versus the gun, I don't know exactly who would win, because maybe the tiger might be able to attack the person. But the point is, the gun is trying to keep the tiger in check. So if you don't have a gun to keep the tiger in check, the tiger is just going to be running around in your mind and causing all sorts of problems, which is what I feel like most people struggle with, because they have these negative thoughts when they didn't ask for them, when they're not helpful, and they have no control of them whatsoever. But by starting to refute them with actual evidence, you do two things. One, you start to diminish them because you realize, oh, okay, like I actually did prepare. And by diminishing them, let's say for that public speaking instance, when you refute it with evidence, now the next time that those negative voices come around, you know what to do, and you can also limit them over time. Because if these voices keep getting refuted again and again and again, they'll stop coming out as strong. So that's what happened in my personal experience, is I started to build a lot of strong confidence from what I was doing and how I was growing and how I was improving. And I would typically, whenever I had these moments of inner critic, I would focus on the preparation that I had done. And the most important thing is I've actually done the preparation. So that was a great way to refute my inner critic. And just as you start to do that over and over and over again, this inner critic turns from a huge tiger to more of a very angry cat. And it's much more manageable. And it's a great way, because in order to become successful, you have to use your mind to its absolute most. You can't have this inner war going on and trying to become successful. So this is really why you have to subdue the inner critic in order to get past and utilize your full potential. And that's why I really think this video is super important. And I make this just help you guys. And if you have any questions, put them down below. And that's also what I was focusing on, is the replace portion. How can we flip this on its head and not only just refute the inner critic, but also replace it with more positive thinking? And this comes back also to the evidence, because when we bring back the evidence, we can refute the inner critic and say, I'm actually not going to fail because I already prepared a bunch of slides and I know what I'm talking about and I've reviewed them already. And then in addition, you can be because I've done that, I'm actually going to do well. And you can insert some positive thinking. So it's not only do you neutralize the inner critic, you actually throw in some extra energy, some extra positive vibes in there that are going to help you boost you up instead of tear you down. And once again, this all comes from the fact that you actually have to do the work. Of course, there may be moments where you never feel like you'll be prepared in your life, but you have to just reach a point where you're I did as much as I possibly could with what I had at that time with the resources, and I just have to give it my best shot. Because a lot of times we compare ourselves to an imaginary standard that's way above us, that we could never achieve, and that would require resources that we don't have. And that's why we have to be extremely practical to refute the inner critic. You just have to say, given the resources, given the time, given the constraints that I had, I did as much as I possibly could to prepare for this, and I know that I will have the best chance of succeeding because of that. And that's really how you not only banish your inner critic, but you also give yourself some optimism that's well-deserved that can boost you towards further success.